Hey map builders, it's Josh with Map Effects, and I want to show you how to make a village map like this with the Desert Buildings add-on pack. And I'm going to be doing something a little bit different in that I'm going to actually be using the Infinite Painter app, because I've actually recently expanded compatibility for the Desert Buildings pack to work with Infinite Painter. So I kind of want to show you how to not only use the pack itself, but how to use this Infinite Painter app, which is a great option if you have an Android tablet. It does also work on iPad, but this is a great little drawing app I thought I'd share with you. So now that we have Infinite Painter all opened, let's come up to our layer panel, and I'm going to change the background color to something that looks a little bit more like a desert map would. So let's just use this basic paper color here. And another feature that you might notice that's kind of cool about this app is that you can actually select some of the built-in textures that come with it. You can select any of these, and you can mess around with the opacity, the scale, the depth, and it just kind of helps give a little bit of extra of that nice paper tooth that looks kind of cool in the map. And it's kind of nice that it's already built into the background layer. So the other thing I'm going to turn on that I already have loaded in here is this mask that I created that's just kind of a watercolor mask. And I'm just going to use this for the purpose of the tutorial to just kind of focus in on just a section of a map instead of feeling like we have to build out a whole map. So this will just kind of help give us a little bit of focus. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to roughly sketch out the shape of the map. So I know that I want to have kind of a little marketplace in here and maybe a couple of buildings over on this side, kind of larger building groups maybe, and maybe a building over here, one here, just kind of a line of buildings over here. I think I want maybe a little bit of a cliff up here. So we're just going to rough that in. You can see that I'm being pretty loose with my sketch here. You don't have to get too worried about making everything look perfect. So I think I'm going to put another building group in here, and maybe a building over here by the cliffs. So you can kind of see that we kind of have our marketplace here in the middle, but then we're going to have a few other buildings that are coming off of it. Maybe a road that's coming off this way. And let's say there's another road going off this way. And if we have this here, let's add in a few buildings. Just like that. And we'll have another road coming down this way. Maybe instead of everything being right in the middle, let's put a building off here. A couple more that are, kind of on your way heading out of town. Just rough this in so we can kind of see where the roads and things are. Okay, pretty happy with that. And let's maybe add like a well over here. We kind of have the gathering place of the market, so let's add like a well or something here, and feels like we need maybe one more building here. So you can see it's super rough, but we kind of have a basic idea of where we want to place some buildings. We want our marketplace here in the middle, a couple of roads coming off of it, and we can make these either, like an inn over here and a blacksmith over here, and we can just have a lot of fun with it. So let's come back up to our layer, just tap on it, and I'm going to lower the opacity of this. I'll keep it maybe a little bit higher so that you can see it. And we can come in here and create another layer above our sketch and below our mask layer. Whoops. So now let's change the color of our brush. We'll just set it to black for the sake of simplicity right now. And we're going to come back into our building groups. And let's scroll down and select, let's go with this one here first. And I'm going to bring my other hand in here and rotate this canvas. And you kind of see that nice thing about using either Infinite Painter or Procreate is when you rotate the canvas, you essentially are rotating the brush. So just as an example, you can see if I stamp it over here, it's oriented that way. Or if I rotate the canvas and stamp it there, then it changed the orientation of it. So I like to just kind of use two hands when I'm drawing with these and just stamp them. And let's come back in here. And actually, you know what? I'm going to rotate this all the way around. I think I want this side to be towards the market. And then I'm going to come back in here. And you might notice to undo, you can just tap with two fingers, and that. So let's rotate this, stamp it just like that. Okay, now let's come back in here and we're going to switch to the folder just called buildings rather than building groups. And we're going to scroll all the way down here until we can find our marketplaces. Here they are. So let's start with this one here. And I'm going to rotate the canvas and put it just close up against these buildings like that. And then let's do this other smaller group here. Looks good. And you might notice as I'm working, I'll kind of zoom in, I'll zoom out, I'll rotate the canvas, and it just kind of gives me a little bit of a better feel for how the composition overall is looking. But let's come back up here and let's add in another building group, I think. So we're going to scroll down and let's use this one here that's more like the buildings kind of lined up. I think that'll work good to place. I think let's go with this one. I kind of like that this building is a little bit more angled in shape. So let's put it right there. I think let's put a blacksmith over here where it's kind of close to town, but it's starting to get a little bit outside of town. And you might notice that, see how the line art is quite a bit darker here than it is here? It's because I accidentally tapped the pin twice. So you can just undo one of those and that should fix that. And if we want to have kind of a little bit more of like a feature building, let's use this one here. It has kind of a little bit of a covered courtyard to it, which is kind of cool. So let's just stamp it right about there so that it's kind of close to town, but it's a little bit outside of the main roads as well. We'll have a separate smaller road kind of coming off to it. And then let's come up here and we'll have maybe like an inn or something like that over here. Let this one kind of bleed off the edge of the map a little bit. It kind of gives you the impression that this is just kind of focused in on one section of the map, but all the land and territory extend beyond the edges. Because even though this is going to be kind of a small little village map, there's a whole bunch of different stories and stuff that you can tell just in this small space. You really don't need as big of a town map or a city map as you might think to make it interesting. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change this to this building. Let's rotate it, stamp it like that. And then I'm kind of thinking, I want a little bit more of like a round building, like this one. But I'm going to kind of tuck it back here where I'm thinking about putting a cliff. Again, I want to have a lot of the main buildings along these roads, but it's good to tuck a few of them back as well. You don't want them all necessarily right on the main roads. You kind of figure that maybe the prime places to build for the more affluent are actually back from the road a little bit. So let's do another one kind of just like that. I think I'm going to scroll up here. Let's go with this one. This one's kind of a cool building that has some rounded shapes as well as some rectangular shapes. And actually, I realized I just oriented this backwards. So let me turn my screen. We'll tuck it right there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's add a few more buildings along this side here. And again, sometimes it's good to just zoom back a little bit, just kind of assess the whole thing and just see how you feel about it. So I think I'm going to add these buildings here along this road now. Let's go with this one. Rotate this until the door. I usually have the doors and stuff covered, so that's how you can kind of tell where you want to have the door. And let's put a little bit smaller building. And in general, a lot of these buildings are arranged largest to smallest, so most of the smaller buildings are kind of down at the bottom. And the reason I did that is usually you start with the biggest buildings first and place those before you come in here and you start filling in with a little bit smaller buildings. You kind of want to have your main focal point buildings in there first. And I was going to put something back here. Let's put more like a farm. And those are actually up here. Let's see. Let's go with this one. And actually, if I have kind of like, you see how there's like a pin with a farm back here? I'm also going to add a windmill just to add another interesting piece. And let's kind of put it a little bit off to the side like that. Okay, and actually I wanted to have a well here. So you can go into, so this desert pack is an add-on pack for the main city map builder. So it has all the buildings and things like that. But if you want to add a well, you can come in here to extras under the city map builder. And there's a small well that you can add here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to now come in here and add some of the roads. So let's turn off our, you know what, let's keep the sketch on for now, just in case. But we'll create a new layer above our sketch, and we're going to come into the walls and towers folder. And there's actually a gritty edge and stipple brush that I've included. And this is the one that I like to use for drawing roads on these kind of more desert style maps. So let's zoom in here. And if you kind of imagine that this is the entrance here, let's start drawing kind of the stipple right in here. And it's going to angle in towards this next doorway and kind of come off of that. And it can continue off the map. And we'll bring this side in. We'll say this is the door here. Continue to the next one. And we'll say, even though this is probably kind of the main entry, we'll say that all of this is kind of in with part of the road. And And there's no really hard rule on, especially something like this. You kind of just mess around with it and figure out, like how perfect do you want the roads. I know that I want a road that's going to come off this way, so I'm just kind of going to do a partial road there. And you might notice that I'm kind of picking up my pin periodically. I don't want the edges to be too defined. Okay, that's kind of all of our main paths, and I'm actually going to turn this sketch off. There we go. Felt like it was starting to, distract a little bit too much. So we're still on the same layer. We'll come in here, we'll keep using our gritty path, and if you tap on this, it'll actually open or close your layer panel. So let's zoom in, and we're just going to add just a little bit around these buildings too, just to add a little bit of texture and interest. And actually, I think I want this market ended up being a little bit too close to this side. I think I want to center it up a little bit. So let's come back in here and we'll select our layer that has the buildings on it. And you'll notice with an Infinite Painter that when you tap on the layer, it'll kind of like do this little highlight thing to let you know what you're working on. So let's come up here. We're going to select our lasso tool. I'm just going to draw around these buildings, or this market, I should say. And we're going to accept the selection, and then we'll come back up here, and then instead of being under Create, you're going to go to Edit again, and then just use the basic Transform tool, and that allows you to move that whole thing over to wherever you want it, and then just hit the check mark. So the one more thing that I want to add in is a couple of cliff faces here. So I'm just going to create another layer above and go into our the main city map builder again, and we're going to go to terrain. And let's see, let's go with this cliff here. We'll rotate our map a little bit. Just stamp that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch this up. I'm going to do this instead. I want it to be a little bit more subtle. So I'm going to come back, see how this one looks. Yeah. So you can see, you can just kind of line these up a little bit to connect them if you need to make a larger cliff. Yeah, something like that looks better. Now if I make it multi-level, so now you kind of have a couple of levels on this cliff. And let's come back and we'll do more of an kind of like an inside curve over on this side. Rotate our map. Sometimes all you can do is kind of stamp it and just see how it looks too. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And actually, while we're in here, let's add in a few kind of like scattered stones. So we can maybe put a couple over here. Switch your brush and put one there. See what else we have. Let's go down here. Let's put a little bit more of a larger grouping right there. And that just kind of dresses it up a little bit. And one other thing that I realized that I should do is let's add kind of a little bit of texture to this path. So again, we're going to switch back to our path. So we're still in our main city map builder, and we're actually going to go up to the brushes folder. And you'll see one that's here that's labeled Stone Grit. So let's select that one. And let's zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see what this one does. But it's just a seamless texture brush that kind of just puts in a few little kind of flecks that look like pieces of dirt or small stones. And you can see that just adds a little bit of texture on these roads. And you can throw a little bit out here too. But we kind of want the eye to be a little bit more drawn to the roads, and your eye is drawn to detail. So let's just, and you might notice I'm not actually filling in the paths perfectly. I'm just kind of almost stippling my brush with, just place in a little bit of texture. Something like that's looking pretty good. Actually, I'll throw a little bit here on these cliffs. Now that you have all the line art for your map done, let's come in here and add a little bit of color. So let's open up our layer panel, and I'm just going to turn off all of the layers except for the buildings, just so we can easily see what we're doing. So what you want to do is come up here, and you're going to go to the edit panel again. And instead of selecting lasso like we did before, this time we're going to select the magic wand tool. And what you're going to do is, oops. All right. What you're going to do is you're actually going to tap on the outside of the buildings. And if you kind of click and drag, you'll see that it increases or decreases the selection. So we're just kind of going to bring this up a little bit, something like that. And now let's zoom in. We're going to go down here to expand. So what this does is it kind of takes your basic selection and expands it a certain amount of pixels. Let's turn this down to about 35% for this one, so that you can see it's kind of just inside the line art. And we're going to accept that by hitting the check mark. And now what you want to do is come down here and go to invert. So this inverted your selection. So now all of your buildings are selected, which is real handy instead of having to try to come in here. And because all these buildings are separated with the line art and stuff, it would be much harder to select all these buildings. But now, by inverting the selection on the outside, you have all of these buildings selected. So now we can accept our selection, and let's create a new layer kind of above our sketch. And what we're going to do is we'll select a color that's really obvious so you can kind of see what's happening here. And we're going to just go to a basic brush tool, and we'll turn the size of it up. So we're going to paint, and you can see that it is only painting color now on the selection that we made based on our building. So this is a really fast and easy way to be able to block in a basic color for all of your buildings. Obviously, we don't want them to be this color, but you kind of get the idea. So what you could do now is let's just turn our selection off. So you're going to come up here to these three dots, and you're going to select import and go to photos. And I actually have a folder already, but this is one of the color palettes that I included in the pack. So you can just select this, and then you're going to select reference. And the cool thing about this is it's not in your layer panel now. You can actually drag this around and move it however you want, but now we have a color palette that we can start pulling colors from. So let's come up here and select the building one just by tapping and holding on that color. You can see that's now our active color. And then for our buildings, we're going to tap on the color layer that we have, and we're going to select this little lock icon, which is the alpha lock feature. And now when we color, we can fill in all of these buildings with kind of a more sandy color that matches the overall palette of the map. Okay, so now let's turn on our other layers. Whoops. So we can see. And we'll turn our mask back on. So now we have our basic color for our buildings. One thing you may notice though as you zoom in is inevitably when you do the selection technique, some of this gets filled in that really shouldn't. So you can just kind of come in here and clean this up a little bit with an eraser tool. So I'm just going to do that real fast. Looking pretty good. So let's actually, while we're here, I'm going to switch to this gritty shader brush. So instead of it being for line art, this is a little bit more for shading. It's pressure sensitive, so if you press real light, it'll only put a little bit of paint down. If you press a little harder, it'll put more down. So I'm going to, since I decided to color in the rocks, I'm going to just add a little bit of the same color up here on the cliffs, just to kind of bring this all together. And I think I'm going to actually really lightly do that on the roads too. You can see I'm not too concerned about making this perfect. I'm just kind of really quickly blocking in just a little bit of shading on the roads, just to lighten it up a little bit and draw your eye to these areas. Okay, so now let's come back in here and we're going to turn this alpha lock back on. And I'm going to go back to my line art brush and let's add some more interesting color to these different buildings and such. So I have your main line art color, the terrain color, building color, accent color, and then all these ones here on the bottom are all the different kind of colors I like to use for the different fabrics and stuff that are included. Because you'll notice if you look at maps of kind of desert areas, all the buildings are kind of like this sandy color, but oftentimes the fabrics are very vibrant and stuff. So that's kind of what I wanted to emulate with this pack. So once you have all these colored in, the last thing you could potentially do is open up your layer panel, and we're just going to come up here to these three dots again, go to import and photo. And once again, I'm going to just go to the file I have ready. So the city map builder comes with a number of paper textures, and you can also download some freebies on the Map Effects website. So we can just select one of these, but this time we're going to put in layer. And we can just kind of scale this up and down to whatever size we need it. Let's position it kind of like that. Select the check mark to accept. And then if you tap on the layer, you can change the blend mode by selecting here, and you could put it on multiply or linear burn. It's always good to kind of just toggle through these and figure out, what looks best for your particular map. I think I'm going to use the linear burn, but then I'm going to turn the opacity of it down quite a bit. So you can just kind of slide it back and forth until we get something that we're happy with. And just like that, you have a pretty cool looking map for one of your campaigns. You don't need to get into shading if you don't want to. Just by coloring in some of the buildings with the color palette that I provided and adding in a paper texture, you can end up with a pretty cool looking map. I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing your map.